Okay, this video is going to show the ideas that we have in uh, Russia, roughly from the time of its founding in 868 up and through the 1500s, and some of its most influential rulers and how it was founded. This is the end of lesson 7, text 5 through 8. Uh, so let's take a look at this um, briefly here. Uh, Basically, so one of the questions is what's a steppe? So Russia was found. Northern Russia, is this steppe of um, open grassland um, and pasturing of herds and horses, and that's what they did to start. Um, then it basically created this great nomadic highway where nomads spread into Europe and settled new territory. Originally, at one time, the Mongols actually controlled Russia. So as we're, excuse me, wrong map. As we're looking at this, this is where the original area, the original territory was along the area of um, Kiev, um, and and later it would spread into Moscow, and this was the steppes along here. So I need to get that in a second. So the Vikings interacted with the Slavs and people of Constantinople and traded with the Slavs and people there, with Kiev as the center, and with Constantinople right here, and there was a highway of trade, so to speak, and this was where Russia really got its start. So a Viking tribe called the Rus began ruling from Nova, Novgorod, and expanded it to include Kiev, which became the original capital of Russia. Um, Constantinople sends Kiev, tried to convert the Christian missionaries, come in to try to convert the Slavs. Cyril and Methodius adapted the Greek alphabet to translate the Bible into Slavic. So the Cyrillic alphabet is still used in Russia, Ukraine, Serbia, Bulgaria. Um, and this was a major influence on the Russian language. So the Rus king Vladimir made Orthodox Christianity the religion of the Rus and aligned his kingdom and politically and culturally to the Byzantines. As you can see, they're the Byzantines in here are relatively close by, so they're therefore easily aligned with them um, during this time period. So this was again starting, roughly 868 and continuing into the 1000s and further into the Middle Ages. So the Mongols eventually um, take over in part of Russia, in a large part of Russia, and really cut off the contact from Western Europe that they had from the nomads that you see up here, that nomadic highway that where they spread into Europe. But that contact was cut off um, for a while when the nomads came in. Ivan the Great, and we need to take a look at Ivan the Great, a picture of Ivan the Great right here, called Ivan the Great or Ivan the Third, because he was the one that really really first called himself Tsar, a Russian word for Caesar, and basically he was able to defeat the Mongols, or help defeat the Mongols, and limit the power of the boyars. The boyars in Russia are what's the noble class, and helped recover territory there, really expanding into Russia into what is over into modern day St. Petersburg, Moscow, in this area where Russia had really had expanded up to that point. I don't need that anymore. Um, See if I can see a better map here for just a second. So you have Russia and then territories that were added um, later on as time goes along. And you can see here, this is a pretty good map, although I wish I could make it a little bit bigger, of if you can see it right here. This was a pretty good map of the extent of the Mongol Empire, which we'll talk about in the next unit. But you can see they had a big part of Russia until Ivan the Great was able to shoo them out. So his grandson later takes over Ivan called Ivan the Terrible. Ivan the Terrible created a feudal type of government, limiting the privileges of the noble families of the boyars, and making new laws that would tie the serfs to the land. You can even see the difference between Ivan the Great and Ivan the Terrible. Ivan the Great has a much more early Middle Ages, less realistic. Well, the painting. This is more of a painting of Ivan the Great during the Middle Ages, and then this is more as the art starts to become more realistic, and this is a look at his grandson, Ivan the Terrible, and he again really was very oppressive. We'll see some comparisons even to Stalin. So his extreme absolute power, and he was really the first one to be referred to as a czar on a permanent basis and not just on a sometimes basis. And it shapes the country in modern times. And there would continue to be a succession of czars with really absolute rule up until the time of the Russian Revolution, after at the in the middle of World War One. So his impact was the impact of the Ivans were pretty significant, introducing this tradition of absolute power, and in the case of Ivan the Terrible, a tradition of extreme absolute power.